What if the one phone call you're terrified to answer at 3 a.m. becomes the reason you finally stop feeling invisible in your own life? This is my real story: an immigrant wife, a struggling mother, a broken marriage, and the midnight miracle that rebuilt everything. No perfect grammar. No fake confidence. Just slow English, real emotions, and an ending that will make you believe again. Your late night is waiting. The call that changed everything. Imagine this. It's 3 a.m. Your bedroom is completely dark. The only sound is the rain hitting the window and your own heartbeat. You haven't slept well for months. Your mind is heavy with thoughts you can't even name in English. And then, your phone rings. Not a text. Not a notification. A real call. Your first thought is fear. Someone is sick. An accident. Bad news. You pick up the phone with shaking hands. Your throat feels tight. You say hello? But your voice is barely a whisper. And then you hear a small voice. A child's voice. Your child. Mom. I need you. 3 words. Simple words. You have heard them in movies 1,000 times. But this time, they are real. And they are in English. You freeze. Because your son has never called you mom in English. He always says me, your native word. He knows you feel safe with that word. But tonight, something is different. Tonight, he chose English. Why? Because earlier that evening, he heard you crying in the kitchen. You thought nobody was listening. You were washing dishes, and the tears just came. You had another fight with your husband, another misunderstanding because you couldn't find the right words. You felt so alone. So invisible. So stupid. But your son heard you. And at 3 a.m., he picked up his tablet, found your number, and called. He didn't know what to say. He just knew he had to say something. So he used the only language he was sure you would take seriously. English. Have you ever felt so lost in a conversation that you just nodded and smiled, even though you understood nothing? Have you ever pretended to check your phone just to avoid answering a simple question like how was your day? Have you ever gone to bed early not because you were tired, but because you were exhausted from translating every single sentence in your head? I have. Too many times. When I first moved to the United States, I thought my biggest problem was grammar. I bought books. I watched videos. I repeated phrases like a robot. Hi, how are you? I am fine, thank you, and you? But nobody actually talks like that here. Real Americans say, hey, how's it going? And you have half a second to respond before they move on. I remember standing in line at a coffee shop in Portland. The barista asked me, what can I get started for you? And my brain just stopped. I knew the words. But my mouth wouldn't move. I felt everyone behind me staring. So I pointed at a picture. I didn't even want that drink. I just wanted to disappear. That was me 3 years ago. A woman in her 30s, living in America, married to an American man. Raising 2 bilingual kids, and completely terrified of saying the wrong thing. My husband, by the way, is a good man. He never laughed at my mistakes. But he also never understood why I couldn't just relax and talk. He would say things like just try, honey. Nobody cares if you make mistakes. And I wanted to scream, you don't care. But I care. My brain cares. My pride cares. Here's what I learned later, from a very patient therapist and a lot of late-night reading. Your brain is not lazy. Your brain is trying to protect you. When you feel embarrassed, your brain releases stress hormones. It says, danger. Don't do that again. So the next time you try to speak English, your brain says, no, remember the coffee shop? Remember the silent car ride home? Stay quiet. Stay safe. That is not weakness. That is biology. But biology can be changed. And that change started for me with a 3 a.m. phone call from a brave little boy who didn't know he was doing something miraculous. After he said, "Mom, I need you," I heard him take a shaky breath. Then he said, "I can't sleep. Can you come sit with me?" Still in English. I walked to his room. He was sitting on his bed, holding his stuffed dinosaur. His eyes were red. He asked me, in English, "Why were you crying?" And I, for the first time in years, did not translate my answer. I did not rehearse it. I did not worry about grammar. I just opened my mouth and said, "Because I feel lonely. Even with people around." He nodded. Then he said something I will never forget. He said, "Then I will learn Vietnamese. So you don't have to feel lonely anymore." I started crying again. But this time, not from sadness. Here is the truth I want you to take away from this first part. You don't need perfect English to connect with the people you love. You just need one honest sentence. One small crack in the wall you built around yourself. That crack lets light in. And sometimes, that light comes from a phone call at midnight. So if you are watching this video right now, feeling tired, feeling stuck, feeling like you'll never get better at English, please hear me. Your midnight is not the end. It might be the beginning. And in the next part, I will tell you what happened the morning after that call. Because the miracle didn't stop with one sentence. It was just getting started. When English feels like a wall. Let me rewind a little. Not too far, just to the months before that midnight phone call. Back when my phone ringing at any hour made my stomach drop. Back when I believed that English was a wall I would never climb. You see, I lived in a small town in Oregon. Beautiful place. Trees everywhere. Friendly neighbors who waved when they drove by. But friendly doesn't mean easy to talk to. They waved. They smiled. And then they drove away. Because what else could they do? They didn't know how to talk to me either. Here is something nobody tells you about learning English in America. The hard part is not the grammar. The hard part is the speed. Americans speak fast. Not because they are rude. Because they are comfortable. They shorten words. They drop sounds. Going to becomes gonna. Want to becomes wanna. What are you doing becomes whatcha doin'. I remember standing in the school pickup line. Other moms gathered in a small circle. They laughed about something. One of them looked at me and said, "Crazy weather we're having, huh?" I understood the word crazy. I understood weather. But my brain was still processing when she had already turned back to her friend. I smiled. Nodded. Said nothing. That was my life. Smile and nod. Smile and nod. Inside, I was screaming. Let me be honest with you. I was not a beginner. I had studied English for years in my home country. I knew thousands of words. I could read news articles. I could write emails, slowly, with a dictionary open. But speaking? Speaking made me feel like a child. A very stupid child. One time, I needed to buy medicine for my daughter. She had a fever. I went to the pharmacy. The pharmacist asked me, "Does she have any allergies?" I knew that word, allergies. But in that moment, with my sick daughter waiting in the car, my brain froze. I said, "No, no allergies." Then he asked, "Has she taken any other medication today?" Medication. I knew that word too. But I couldn't remember if Tylenol counted as medication or just medicine. My mouth opened. Nothing came out. He looked at me with pity. Pity is worse than anger. Anger you can fight. Pity makes you want to disappear. I left without the medicine. My husband had to go back later. He didn't get angry. He just said, "You should have called me." But I didn't want to call him. I wanted to be capable. I wanted to be a normal mom who could buy medicine for her own child. Do you feel that? That heavy, sick feeling in your chest when you fail at something so simple? When a child could do it, but you cannot? That was me. Every single day. And then there was the cultural part. Oh, the culture. In America, people ask how are you? But they don't want a real answer. They want good, you? That's it. 2 seconds. Then move on. The first time a cashier asked me how are you? I started explaining that I was tired because my baby didn't sleep well. Her smile froze. The line behind me grew. I learned quickly, do not answer honestly. Just say good, you, and keep walking. It felt fake to me. In my culture, when someone asks how you are, they mean it. You sit down. You drink tea. You talk. Here, everything is fast. Everything is surface level. And I kept making mistakes. I remember a parent-teacher conference at my son's school. His teacher said, "He's doing great, but he's a little shy in class." I nodded. Then she said, "We'd love to have you volunteer for the field trip next month." I panicked. I said, "I will think about it." She smiled. Later, I learned that "I will think about it" sounds like no to Americans. If you want to say yes, you say yes. If you want to say no, you say no. But I didn't know that. I thought I was being polite. Instead, I looked like someone who didn't care. My son came home that day and asked, "Mom, why don't you ever come to my school?" That question broke something in me. Not because he was angry. Because he was confused. He didn't understand why his mom was different. Why other moms chatted and laughed and volunteered, and his mom just waved from the car. Here's what I want you to understand. The wall is not made of vocabulary. The wall is made of fear of being judged. Every time you open your mouth, you imagine people thinking, "Where is she from? Why does she talk like that? Doesn't she know basic English?" But here is the secret I discovered. Most Americans are not thinking that. They are thinking about their own problems. Their bills. Their kids. Their tired feet. They are not grading your grammar. They are just trying to get through their day. The only person judging you harshly is you. I know that sounds like a motivational poster. But let me prove it with science. Psychologists call it the spotlight effect. You believe everyone is watching you, noticing your mistakes. In reality, most people don't notice at all. They are too busy worrying about their own spotlight. So why did I keep suffering? Because my brain had learned a pattern. Speak English, feel embarrassed, avoid English. It was a loop. A very painful, lonely loop. The midnight phone call from my son did not break that loop immediately. But it made a tiny crack. Because in that moment, I spoke without thinking. I said how I felt. And nobody laughed. Nobody corrected me. Nobody even noticed my grammar mistakes, because there were none. I said simple words. I feel lonely. 3 words. Perfect grammar. Perfect meaning. That night, I realized something. Maybe the wall was not as high as I thought. Maybe I just needed to stop trying to climb it with one big jump, and start walking around it, one small step at a time. In the next part, I'll tell you how that one phone call started to change my marriage. Because my husband and I had built our own wall too, a wall made of silence and misunderstood words. And that wall was about to crack. A marriage on silent mode. Let me tell you about my husband, David. David is a good man. He works hard. He loves our kids. He never raises his voice. On paper, he is the perfect husband. But for 2 years, our marriage was dying. Not with loud fights or slammed doors. It was dying with silence. Long, heavy, exhausting silence. Here is what happens when you marry someone who speaks a different native language. At first, it's exciting. You learn cute phrases. You laugh at mistakes. You use hands and faces and broken sentences. Love carries you through the first year. But love gets tired. Love gets impatient. And slowly, the silence creeps in. David would come home from work and ask, "How was your day?" And I would say, "Good." That's it. One word. Because I couldn't explain the chaos. I couldn't explain that the toddler had a meltdown at the grocery store, that I couldn't find the right yogurt. That the cashier said something I didn't catch, and I just smiled like an idiot. How do you say all that in a second language when your brain is already exhausted? So I said good. And David said good. And we ate dinner in silence. He thought I was angry at him. I wasn't. I was angry at myself. But he didn't know that. Because I didn't have the words to explain. Have you ever been in a relationship where you have so much to say, but your mouth refuses to cooperate? Where the person you love most looks at you with confusion, and you want to scream it's not you, it's the language. But even that sentence feels too hard? I lived there for 2 years. One night, we had a real fight. A rare one. David said, "You never talk to me anymore." I said, "I talk." He said, "No, you say good and okay and fine. That's not talking." I felt my face get hot. I wanted to explain. I wanted to tell him about the 30 minutes I spent on the phone with the insurance company, trying to understand why a doctor's visit cost so much. I wanted to tell him about the neighbor who asked me for a recipe and I couldn't name the spices. I wanted to tell him how small I felt every single day. But instead, I said, "You don't understand." And I walked away. That was our pattern. He would try. I would freeze. He would get frustrated. I would cry alone. Repeat. 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 Here's what I learned later, from a marriage counselor who specialized in bilingual couples. When one partner struggles with the shared language, the other partner often feels rejected. Not because they are mean. Because they don't know the difference between I can't speak and I don't want to speak. To them, silence feels like a closed door. And after a while, they stop trying to open it. David stopped trying. Not because he stopped loving me. Because he was tired of being locked out. And I was tired of being locked in. The saddest part? We still loved each other. We still held hands in public. We still laughed at our kids' silly jokes. But at night, when the kids were asleep, we became two strangers sharing a bed. He watched sports on his phone. I read Vietnamese news on mine. Together, but completely alone. I remember one Thanksgiving. David's whole family came over. His mother, his father, his two sisters, their husbands, and 4 loud, happy nieces. Everyone talked at once. Jokes flew across the table. Stories overlapped. I understood maybe 40%. I smiled. I nodded. I ate my mashed potatoes slowly so I wouldn't have to talk. At one point, David's sister asked me directly, "So what do you miss most from home?" I understood the question. I had practiced this answer before. But under the pressure of 7 people looking at me, my brain collapsed. I said, "Food." She waited for more. I said nothing. She smiled politely and turned away. David didn't say anything at the table. But on the drive home, he said, "You could have said more. They like you. They want to know you." I started crying. He said, "Why are you crying?" "I'm not attacking you." And I couldn't explain that his words felt like an attack because I already hated myself for freezing. That night, I went to bed early. He stayed up watching TV. We didn't say goodnight. That was our marriage 6 months before the midnight phone call. Cold. Quiet. Drowning. But here is the thing about hitting the bottom. You can't go any lower. And sometimes, that is exactly where you need to be to finally look up. The midnight phone call from my son did not fix my marriage. But it did something smaller, and more important. It reminded me that I could speak. Not perfectly. Not fluently. But honestly. When my son asked why I was crying, I said I feel lonely. 3 words. No preparation. No dictionary. Just truth. And the next morning, something shifted. David made coffee, like he always did. But this time, he sat down next to me and said, "You seemed sad last night. Do you want to talk?" Not "Why didn't you talk?" Not "You should talk more." Just, "Do you want to talk?" That small change in his question made all the difference. He wasn't demanding. He was inviting. I took a breath. And I said something I had never said before. "I'm not sad at you. I'm sad at me. I feel stupid every day. And I'm tired of feeling stupid." David put his hand on mine. He didn't say, "You're not stupid." He just said, "Okay. Tell me more." For the first time in 2 years, I tried. I used simple words. Short sentences. Sometimes the wrong verb tense. But I kept going. And he listened. Not like a husband waiting for his wife to finish. Like a man who finally saw the door crack open. That conversation lasted 10 minutes. 10 minutes of broken English and honest feelings. And when it ended, I wasn't fixed. But I wasn't drowning anymore. Someone had thrown me a rope. In the next part, I'll tell you what happened when I realized that my own home had become a place where I felt like a stranger, and how I started to find my way back. The stranger in my own home. Let me ask you something. Have you ever walked into your own living room and felt like a guest? Like you didn't quite belong there? Like everyone else knew the rules, and you were just visiting? That was me. Every single day. My home was a nice home. Beige walls. Soft carpet. A fridge full of food. Pictures of my kids on the wall. But none of it felt like mine. Because the language in that home was not my language. The jokes were not my jokes. The rhythms were not my rhythms. David would say, "Honey, can you grab the remote?" And I would look around, confused. Remote? Oh, the clicker. The thing that changes channels. In my language, we call it something completely different. So even simple things felt foreign. One evening, my daughter was watching a cartoon. A character said something funny. My daughter laughed and said, "Mom, did you hear that?" I said yes. But I didn't hear it. Not really. The words were too fast. The joke was cultural. I smiled anyway. But my daughter saw through it. She said, "You didn't get it, did you?" Her voice wasn't mean. Just disappointed. That tiny disappointment cut deeper than any insult. I started avoiding the living room. I spent more time in the kitchen. Or in my bedroom. Anywhere I didn't have to pretend. Here is the truth nobody talks about. When you live in a country where you didn't grow up, your own home can become a museum. Everything is on display. Nothing is yours. The furniture, the TV shows, the dinner conversations, they all belong to someone else's culture. And you are just a visitor. I remember trying to cook a dish from my home country. The smell filled the kitchen. For a moment, I felt happy. I felt like myself. Then David walked in and said, "Wow, that's strong." He didn't say it was bad. But I heard criticism. I stopped cooking that dish. For 2 years, I only made American food. Pasta. Tacos. Hamburgers. I got very good at tacos. But every time I made them, I felt like I was wearing someone else's clothes. My kids started forgetting my language. Slowly at first. Then faster. They would mix English and my native language in the same sentence. Then they stopped using my language altogether. I would say something to them in my language, and they would answer in English. I felt like I was losing them. Not physically. But the connection, the deep, easy connection that comes from sharing a first language, was slipping away. One night, my son asked me for help with his homework. It was a story about American history. I read the first paragraph. I understood maybe 70%. My son looked at me and said, "It's okay, Mom. I'll ask Dad later." He didn't mean to hurt me. He was just being practical. But I felt useless. My own child couldn't depend on me for schoolwork. What kind of mother was I? I went to the bathroom and cried. Locked the door so nobody would hear. I looked at myself in the mirror. My face was red. My eyes were swollen. And I thought, who are you? You live here. You sleep here. But you don't belong here. That is a terrible feeling. To be a stranger in your own home. Here's what I learned about that feeling. It grows in silence. Every time you don't speak, it gets bigger. Every time you pretend to understand, it gets stronger. Every time you say never mind instead of explaining, it plants another seed of loneliness. But here is also what I learned. That feeling is not permanent. It can shrink. It can leave. But only if you do something different. The midnight phone call from my son was the first different thing. But the second different thing happened a few days later. I was folding laundry in the living room. David was watching a show. He laughed at something. I looked at the screen. I didn't understand the joke. But instead of looking away, I said, "What did he say?" David looked surprised. I never asked that. I always pretended. He paused the TV and explained the joke. It took 30 seconds. And you know what? I still didn't really think it was funny. But that wasn't the point. The point was that I asked. I didn't hide. I didn't pretend. I just said, "Help me understand." That small act, asking for help, changed something in our home. Not overnight. But slowly, the walls started to feel less cold. I also started doing something else. Every morning, before anyone woke up, I would sit in the living room alone. I would look at the pictures on the wall. I would say out loud, in English, "This is my home. These are my children. I belong here." It felt silly at first. Like I was an actor in a play. But I kept doing it. Day after day. And slowly, my brain started to believe it. Psychologists call this self-affirmation. It sounds simple. But it works. When you tell yourself something repeatedly, your brain starts to rewire. The old pattern, "I don't belong here," slowly loses power. A new pattern takes its place. I am not saying I woke up one day feeling completely at home. That is not how healing works. But I stopped hiding in the kitchen. I started sitting on the couch again. I started asking questions. Small questions. What are you watching? Who is that character? Why is that funny? And my family started answering. Not with pity. With welcome. One evening, my daughter came home from school and said, "Mom, can you help me with my math homework?" Math is numbers. Numbers are universal. For the first time in months, I could help. I sat with her for an hour. We didn't speak much. But we were together. And that togetherness felt like a tiny home inside the home. The stranger was still there some days. But she was getting smaller. And the real me, the mother, the wife, the woman who belonged, was getting louder. In the next part, I will finally take you back to that midnight phone call. Not the first one. Another one. A call that came months later, when I thought I had already failed again. That call taught me the real meaning of a miracle. That midnight phone call. Now I need to tell you about the call. Not the short version I gave you at the beginning. The real version. The one with all the messy, ugly, beautiful details. It was a Tuesday. Nothing special about Tuesday. Rain, as usual. I had spent the afternoon fighting with the school about a permission slip I didn't understand. The woman on the phone spoke so fast. I asked her to repeat 3 times. On the 3rd time, she sighed. I heard the sigh. It was small. But I felt it in my chest like a punch. That night, David and I had another silent dinner. He ate his chicken. I pushed my rice around the plate. The kids were noisy, thank God. Their noise covered our quiet. After dinner, I cleaned the kitchen. David put the kids to bed. We passed each other in the hallway. He said, "Good night." I said, "Good night." 2 words. That was our conversation. I went to bed at 10. But I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling. My mind ran in circles. Why can't I learn this language? Why is everything so hard? Why do I feel so alone? The questions had no answers. They just circled and circled. At midnight, I gave up. I got out of bed and went to the kitchen. I made tea. Not American tea from a bag. Real tea from a tin my mother had sent me. The tea tasted like home. That made me miss home more. I sat at the kitchen table in the dark. The only light came from the street outside. Rain tapped on the window. I started crying. Not loud crying. The quiet kind. The kind where tears just fall and you don't even wipe them because you're too tired. I cried for 10 minutes. Maybe 20. I lost track. Then I heard footsteps. Small footsteps. Bare feet on the hallway floor. My son, Leo, appeared in the kitchen doorway. He was 8 years old. He wore dinosaur pajamas. His hair was messy. His eyes were sleepy but worried. He said, "Mom? Why are you sitting in the dark?" I wiped my face quickly. "Nothing, baby. Go back to bed." He didn't move. "Mom. I heard you crying." I wanted to lie. I wanted to say, "No, I wasn't," or "I have allergies." But something stopped me. Maybe I was too tired to lie. Maybe his small, honest face broke something open in me. I said, "I'm just sad." He walked closer. "Why are you sad? How do you explain loneliness to an 8-year-old? How do you explain language barriers and cultural isolation to a child who was born here, who speaks English without thinking? Who has never known what it feels like to be the foreign one?" I took a breath. And I said the simplest truth I could find. I miss my home. And I feel like I don't belong here. Leo thought for a moment. Then he climbed onto the chair next to me. He put his small hand on mine. And then he did something I will never forget. He said, in English, "Mom. You are my home." Not his native language. Not the language we spoke at home. English. He chose English because he knew that was the language of this place. He was telling me, in the language of America, that I belonged. I started crying again. But this time I was smiling. Then he said something else. He said, "Can I call you? When I can't sleep? Then you won't be alone." I laughed through my tears. "You're already here, baby." I mean on the phone. From my room. So you can come sit with me. That was the moment. That small, strange request. He wanted to call me from his bedroom. He wanted to pretend we were far apart so he could bring us together. I said yes. The next night, at 3 a.m., my phone rang. It was Leo. He said, "Mom? Can you come sit with me?" I went to his room. He was sitting up in bed, holding his stuffed dinosaur. He said, "Tell me a story. In your language. I want to learn." And I did. I told him a story my grandmother told me. A silly story about a rabbit and a moon. I told it in my native language. He didn't understand every word. But he listened. And when I finished, he said, "Now tell me in English." I tried. My English was slow. My grammar was wrong. I said the rabbit jumped to the moon instead of jumped. Leo didn't correct me. He just smiled and said, again, "Mom. Slower." We did this every night for 2 weeks. He would call me. I would come. We would trade stories. First in my language. Then in broken English. Then in slightly better English. Here's what I learned from those midnight calls. Children don't care about perfect grammar. They care about connection. Leo didn't love me because I spoke well. He loved me because I showed up. Every night. Even at 3 a.m. Even when I was tired. Even when I felt stupid. And slowly, something shifted in my brain. I stopped thinking of English as a test I had to pass. I started thinking of it as a bridge to my son. Every wrong word was still a step across that bridge. Every awkward sentence was still a sentence. The midnight phone call didn't fix my life overnight. But it gave me a new reason to try. Not for a grade. Not for a job. Not to impress my husband's family. For my son. So he could know me. All of me. The me who told rabbit stories. The me who cried in the dark. The me who was learning to speak again. In the next part, I'll tell you about the sentence that changed everything. One simple sentence Leo said during one of those calls. A sentence so small, but so powerful, that it rewired my entire relationship with English. One sentence, one miracle. Now I need to tell you about the sentence. The one that broke me open. The one that made all the late nights worth it. It was the fourth night of our midnight calls. Leo had called me at 2 a.m. I went to his room. He was sitting cross-legged on his bed, his dinosaur pajamas twisted from sleep. He didn't look tired. He looked like a little king waiting for his story. I sat on the edge of his bed. I asked, "Your language or mine?" He thought for a moment. Then he said, "Tonight, both." So I started. I told a story in my native language. A simple story about a little fish who wanted to fly. The fish tried jumping out of the water. Again and again. The other fish laughed. But the little fish kept trying. When I finished, Leo said, "Now in English." I took a breath. My English was still shaky. I said, "There is a fish. Small fish. He wants to fly. He jump again. Other fish laugh. But he no stop. Terrible grammar. Wrong verb tense. Missing words. But Leo didn't care. He was watching my face. Listening to my voice. Then he said something I will never forget. He said, "Mom. You are the fish." I froze. You keep trying. Even when it's hard. Even when people don't understand. You keep jumping. I started crying. Not sad crying. The kind of crying when someone sees you. Really sees you. Not the person you pretend to be. The real you. The one who is tired but still trying. Leo put his small hand on my cheek. He said, "I'm proud of you, Mom." 3 sentences. Simple sentences. But they hit me like a wave. You are the fish. I'm proud of you. In that moment, I stopped seeing myself as a failure. I stopped seeing my broken English as a weakness. I saw myself through my son's eyes. A woman who kept jumping. Even when the water was cold. Even when the other fish laughed. That was the miracle. Not a sudden ability to speak perfectly. Not a magic grammar fix. A shift in how I saw myself. Here's what I learned that night. Most of us don't have a language problem. We have a shame problem. We believe that if we can't speak perfectly, we shouldn't speak at all. We believe that mistakes mean we are stupid. We believe that people are judging us. But children don't think that way. Children see effort. They see courage. They don't hear wrong verb tenses. They hear love. Leo didn't correct my grammar. He didn't say it's he doesn't stop, not he no stop. He just listened. And he saw me. That night, after Leo fell asleep, I went back to the kitchen. I made tea. I sat in the dark. But this time I wasn't crying from sadness. I was thinking. I thought about all the years I had spent avoiding English. All the conversations I had escaped. All the times I had said never mind when I really wanted to say something important. I had been so afraid of being judged that I had judged myself first. Harsher than anyone else ever could. And for what? For a perfect grammar that doesn't exist? For an accent that will never disappear? For a fluency that takes years to build? I decided something that night. I decided to stop waiting until I was ready. I decided to start speaking. Not perfectly. Not confidently at first. Just speaking. The next morning, I did something small but huge for me. David was making breakfast. Eggs. Toast. Coffee. He asked, "How did you sleep?" Normally, I would say fine. That's it. One word. Safe. Boring. But this time I said more. I said, I slept okay. Leo called me at 2. He wanted a story. I told him one. It was nice. David looked at me. He didn't say much. But he smiled. A real smile. Not the polite one. The one that reaches his eyes. He said, "That sounds nice." 2 sentences. A short conversation. But for me, it was a victory. I had spoken. Not perfectly. But honestly. And the world didn't end. Here is the science behind what happened. Psychologists call this exposure therapy. You face the thing you're afraid of in small, safe doses. Your brain learns that the thing is not actually dangerous. The fear slowly loses its power. Every time I spoke English without running away, my fear got a little smaller. Every time I made a mistake and nobody laughed, my shame got a little lighter. Every time I said something real instead of fine or okay, my confidence grew a little stronger. The sentence Leo said, "You are the fish," became my anchor. Whenever I felt scared, I repeated it in my head. You are the fish. Keep jumping. I started jumping more. I talked to the cashier at the grocery store. Not just hello and thank you. Real sentences. The apples look good today. Do you know if this milk is on sale? Simple. Short. But mine. I talked to other parents at school pickup. I said things like, "Your daughter is so tall now, and I love your shoes." Small talk. The kind of talk I used to hate. But I practiced. And it got easier. I still made mistakes. I still felt embarrassed sometimes. But the embarrassment didn't stop me anymore. Because I had a new belief: mistakes are not proof that I'm stupid. Mistakes are proof that I'm trying. And trying is the fish jumping out of the water. In the next part, I'll tell you how I learned to truly listen. Not just to words. To the music underneath. Because once I started speaking more, I realized I had never really learned to hear English. And that was about to change. Learning to listen again. Let me tell you about the most important skill I learned. It wasn't speaking. It wasn't grammar. It wasn't vocabulary. It was listening. Before the midnight phone calls with Leo, I thought listening was just hearing sounds, turning on my ears. But real listening is different. Real listening means you stop preparing your answer. You stop translating every word in your head. You stop worrying about what you will say next. You just listen. I was terrible at this. For years, when someone spoke English to me, my brain went into panic mode. While they were still talking, I was already trying to translate. Word by word. Like a computer with a very slow processor. By the time I finished translating the first sentence, they were already on sentence 3. I was always behind. Always lost. So I stopped listening. I started pretending. I watched mouths move. I waited for keywords. Then I guessed. Sometimes I guessed right. Often I guessed wrong. One time, a neighbor told me there would be a block party on Saturday. I heard black party. I thought it was a party with a dress code. I wore a black dress. Everyone else wore jeans and t-shirts. They were grilling hamburgers. I stood in the corner, very confused, wearing a black dress. Nobody explained why I was overdressed. They just smiled politely. That was my life. Confused, overdressed, and smiling. The midnight calls with Leo started to change this. Not because Leo was a great teacher. Because Leo was patient. He didn't get frustrated when I didn't understand. He just repeated himself. Slower. With smaller words. And here is the thing. Children speak simply. They don't use big vocabulary. They don't talk about insurance policies or tax forms. They talk about dinosaurs and pizza and why the sky is blue. Their English is easier. And practicing with Leo gave me confidence. But the real breakthrough came one night when I wasn't even trying to learn. David and I were watching a movie. A romantic comedy. The characters spoke fast. I understood maybe half. Normally, I would have given up. I would have looked at my phone. But that night, I decided to try something different. I closed my eyes. I stopped looking at the screen. I just listened to the voices. Not the words. The voices. The tone. The emotion. The pauses. And something strange happened. I understood more. Not every word. But the feeling. I knew when a character was sad. I knew when they were joking. I knew when they were lying. The words were still blurry. But the meaning was clear. I opened my eyes and looked at David. I said, I think she's going to break up with him. David looked surprised. How did you know? She hasn't said it yet. I pointed at the TV. Her voice. It's different. David smiled. You're learning to listen. That night, I realized something important. English is not just words. English is music. Every language has its own rhythm, its own melody, its own feeling. I had been trying to understand the lyrics without hearing the song. No wonder I was failing. So I started practicing listening differently. Every morning, I made coffee and sat in the living room. I turned on the radio. Not a learning podcast. Not slow English. Just normal American radio. People talking fast. About weather. About sports. About news I didn't care about. I didn't try to understand everything. I just listened to the music of it. The ups and downs. The fast parts and slow parts. The laughter. The sighs. At first, it sounded like noise. But after a few weeks, I started hearing patterns. I started recognizing common phrases. You know what I mean? I don't know about that. That's crazy. These phrases repeated everywhere. On the radio. On TV. In the grocery store. They were the glue of American conversation. And I was finally hearing them. Here is the science part. Your brain has something called auditory processing. When you learn a new language, your brain needs time to recognize the sounds. Not just the words. The sounds. The way Americans say water like water. The way they say going to like gonna. Your brain needs to hear these sounds many times before it accepts them as normal. Most learners give up too early. They listen for a week, understand nothing, and quit. But your brain is working even when you don't feel it. Every time you listen, even without understanding, your brain is building new pathways. Slowly. Quietly. Like roots growing underground. I started listening everywhere. In the car. At the gym. While folding laundry. I stopped caring about understanding. I just wanted my brain to get comfortable with the music of English. And slowly, the music started to make sense. One evening, Leo was watching a cartoon. A character said something fast. Normally, I would have ignored it. But this time, I caught it. I understood the whole sentence. Not translated. Just understood. I said to Leo, he said he wants the red crayon. Leo looked at me. His eyes got big. Mom. You understood. I started crying. Again. I cried a lot during this journey. But these were good tears. I wasn't sad. I was amazed. My brain had been working. All those hours of listening. All those nights of not understanding. It was working. Learning to listen changed everything. Because once I could hear English clearly, speaking became easier. The words felt more familiar. The sounds felt less strange. I wasn't guessing anymore. I was just talking. In the next part, I'll tell you how I used small, simple words to rebuild my marriage. Not big vocabulary. Not perfect grammar. Just small words. And how those small words built a bridge I thought was impossible. Small words, big bridges. After that night with Leo, something shifted between David and me. Not a big shift. Not a Hollywood movie shift where the couple suddenly falls back in love and dances in the kitchen. A small shift. The kind you almost miss if you aren't paying attention. David started looking at me differently. Not with pity. Not with frustration. With curiosity. Like he was seeing a person he hadn't met before. And I started talking to him differently. Not with long, perfect sentences I had rehearsed in my head. With small words. Simple words. Words I actually knew. Here is the mistake I made for years. I thought I needed big vocabulary to be interesting. I thought I needed complex sentences to sound smart. So I would prepare in my head. I would search for the right word. The impressive word. And by the time I found it, the moment was gone. So I stopped. I decided to use only the words I knew. Small words. Short sentences. Like a child. And something amazing happened. David understood me better. One night, we were sitting on the couch. The kids were asleep. The TV was off. It was just us. Quiet. But not the painful quiet. A softer quiet. David said, "You seem different lately." Happier. I thought for a moment. How to explain? I didn't have the word for transformation or breakthrough. So I used small words. I said, I was scared before. Scared to talk. Scared to be wrong. Now I'm less scared. David nodded. Why? What changed? I pointed toward Leo's room. Him. He calls me at night. We tell stories. He doesn't care if my words are wrong. David was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I'm sorry. I think I cared too much about your words being right. That was a big sentence from him. A brave sentence. I didn't expect it. I said, you didn't say it. But I felt it. Every time you corrected me. Every time you finished my sentence. I felt like I was failing. David put his hand on mine. I didn't know. I thought I was helping. I know. But helping feels like hurting when you're already down. We sat with that for a minute. Two people who loved each other but had forgotten how to say it in a language that worked for both of us. Then David said something that changed everything. He said, can we start over? Not the whole marriage. Just talking. Small words. Like you and Leo. I laughed. A real laugh. You want to pretend I don't know English? No. I want to pretend I don't know big words. I want to meet you where you are. That was the bridge. Not a fancy bridge made of perfect grammar and advanced vocabulary. A small bridge made of small words. I'm sorry. I didn't know. Can we start over? We made a deal that night. No more correcting. No more finishing each other's sentences. No more frustrated sighs when I couldn't find a word. Just patience. Just small words. Just trying. The next morning, David made coffee. He handed me a cup and said, how did you sleep? I said, Leo woke me at 2. But it was good. We talked about fish. David smiled. Tell me about the fish. So I did. In small words. Simple sentences. There was a small fish who wanted to fly. The other fish laughed. But the fish kept jumping. David listened. Really listened. He didn't check his phone. He didn't look at the TV. He just looked at me. When I finished, he said, you're the fish. I started crying. Again. But these were good tears. Leo said the same thing. Leo is smart. He is. We sat together. Drinking coffee. Not talking much. But the silence was different now. It wasn't a wall. It was a blanket. Warm. Safe. Here is what I learned. Big problems don't always need big solutions. My marriage was falling apart because of silence. But the solution wasn't a grand speech or a perfect apology. The solution was small words. Spoken slowly. Repeated often. I love you. 3 words. I missed you. 3 words. I'm scared. 2 words. Help me. 2 words. These words are not hard. A child can say them. But I had been too proud to say them. Too ashamed to admit that I needed help. Too afraid that help me would sound weak. But weakness is not saying help me. Weakness is pretending you don't need help while you drown. David started using small words too. He stopped saying things like, perhaps we could discuss this later, and started saying, can we talk tonight? He stopped saying, I'm experiencing some frustration, and started saying, I feel sad when you don't talk. Small words. Small sentences. But they carried so much weight. One evening, David came home from work. He looked tired. He sat down next to me on the couch and said, hard day. I said, tell me. And he did. He used small words. My boss was angry. I made a mistake. I feel bad. Before, he would have kept that inside. He would have said I'm fine and turned on the TV. But he was meeting me where I was. Using small words. Being simple. Being real. I put my hand on his. Everyone makes mistakes. You are still good. He looked at me. You sound like a mom. I am a mom. And I'm your wife. And I love you. 4 small words. And I love you. They are not hard to say. But I hadn't said them in months. Not because I stopped loving him. Because I was too busy being scared and sad and silent. David's eyes got wet. He said, I love you too. That night, we held hands on the couch. We didn't fix everything. But we built a small bridge. And a small bridge is better than no bridge. In the next part, I'll tell you how I learned to read again. Not books. Not newspapers. My own family's emotions. And how that changed everything. Reading between the cries. By the time we reached this point in the story, I had learned 2 important things. I had learned to listen to the music of English. And I had learned to speak with small, honest words. But there was one more skill I needed. Reading. Not reading books. Not reading newspapers. Reading people. Reading the space between their words. Reading the silence. Reading the cries that never came out loud. You see, my family had been crying for a long time. Not with tears. With behavior. With distance. With short answers and long sighs. I just didn't know how to read those signs. Because I was too busy reading my own fear. The first person I learned to read was my daughter, Mia. Mia was 6 years old at the time. She was quiet. Not shy. Just observant. She watched everything. She noticed when I didn't laugh at the TV show. She noticed when David and I ate dinner without talking. She noticed when I stared out the window for too long. But she never said anything. She just watched. One afternoon, I was helping Mia with her drawing. She was coloring a picture of our family. 4 stick figures. Me, David, Leo, and her. But her picture was different from most kids' drawings. In her picture, the mom stick figure was standing apart. Separate. Like an island. I looked at the drawing. My heart hurt. I said, Mia, why am I over here by myself? She didn't answer right away. She kept coloring. Then she said, very quietly, because you're always alone. I felt like someone had punched me in the chest. What do you mean? She looked up at me with her big brown eyes. You sit in the kitchen. Daddy sits in the living room. You don't laugh together anymore. She was 6. 6 years old. And she had read our marriage better than any therapist. I put my arm around her. I'm sorry, baby. I didn't know you noticed. I notice everything, she said. I just don't say it. That broke me. Not in a bad way. In a way that woke me up. My daughter had been reading the pain in our home for months. Maybe years. And I had been so focused on my own struggle with English that I didn't see her reading. I didn't see her carrying the weight. Here's what I learned that day. Children are the best readers in the world. They don't read words. They read energy. They read tone. They read the space between a fine and a real fine. They know when something is wrong, even when no one says it. But I had been blind. Not because I didn't love my daughter. Because I was too tired to look up. Too tired to read anything beyond my own pain. That night, I made a decision. I would start reading my family. Not with a dictionary. With my heart. I started watching David more carefully. Not his words. His body. The way his shoulders dropped when he came home. The way he rubbed his neck when he was stressed. The way he looked at the kids when he thought no one was watching, with so much love it almost hurt. I had been reading him wrong for years. When he was quiet, I thought he was angry at me. But he wasn't angry. He was tired. When he didn't ask about my day, I thought he didn't care. But he did care. He just didn't know how to ask without making me feel pressured. I started reading Leo differently too. His midnight calls weren't just about stories. He was reading me. He knew I was sad before I even said it. He was calling not because he couldn't sleep. He was calling because he could feel my loneliness from across the hall. And Mia. Sweet, quiet Mia. She wasn't being shy. She was being a witness. She was absorbing everything. And she was waiting for someone to notice. One evening, I sat down with Mia while she was drawing. I said, "Teach me to draw." She looked surprised. "You don't know how to draw?" "Not like you. You see things I don't see. Teach me to see." She smiled. A small smile. But it was real. She showed me how to draw a tree. Not a stick tree. A real tree with branches that went in different directions. She said, "Trees are like families. The branches go different ways, but they're all connected to the same trunk." I stared at her. "Where did you learn that?" She shrugged. "I just see it." That was the moment I realized my daughter was not just a child. She was a teacher. She had been reading the world with a clarity I had lost. And if I wanted to heal my family, I needed to learn to read like her. I started practicing. Every day, I would sit with one family member. Just sit. No phone. No TV. No agenda. I would watch their face. Their hands. Their eyes. I would listen to what they didn't say. One day, David came home from work. He said, "Fine," when I asked how his day was. But his jaw was tight. His shoulders were high. I said, "You don't look fine." He paused. Then he said, "My boss yelled at me. For something that wasn't my fault." Before, I would have just said that's too bad and moved on. But this time, I said, "Tell me more." And he did. For 20 minutes, he told me about his boss, about the mistakes someone else made, about how unfair it felt. I didn't give advice. I didn't try to fix it. I just listened. And read his face. And nodded. When he finished, he said, "Thank you." I didn't know I needed to say that. That was reading. Not reading a book. Reading a person. Seeing the cry behind the fine. In the next part, I'll tell you how I finally learned to speak without fear. Not perfectly. But freely. And how that freedom changed everything for my family. Speaking slowly, loving deeply. After learning to listen and read, there was only one thing left. The thing I had feared most from the beginning. Speaking. Not the small words I used with Leo at midnight. Not the simple sentences I tried with David over coffee. Real speaking. Conversations that lasted more than 2 minutes. Talking without a script. Opening my mouth and letting English come out, even when it came out wrong. For months, I had been practicing in the shadows. Listening to the radio. Reading my family's emotions. Whispering stories to Leo. But I was still scared of the outside world. The cashier. The other parents. The woman at the pharmacy who sighed when I asked her to repeat. I was still afraid of being judged. Then one day, something happened that pushed me over the edge. In a good way. Mia came home from school crying. Not a little cry. A big, messy, can't breathe cry. I held her on the couch. She said, between sobs, that a girl in her class had been mean. The girl said Mia's drawings were ugly. Mia loved her drawings. She spent hours on them. The words cut deep. I wanted to call the school. I wanted to talk to the teacher. But my hand shook at the thought. A phone call? In English? To a teacher I had never spoken to before? But my daughter was crying. And something in me woke up. A mother bear. A voice that said, you can be scared, or you can help your child. You can't do both. I picked up the phone. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding. I dialed the school's number. A woman answered. I said, hello, this is Mia's mom. My voice was quiet. But it was there. I explained the situation. Slowly. In small words. I said, a girl said Mia's drawings are ugly. Mia is very sad. Can someone talk to the girl? The woman on the phone was kind. She said, I'm so sorry that happened. I will talk to the teacher right away. Thank you for calling. I hung up. My hands were still shaking. But I was smiling. I had done it. I had made a phone call in English. For my daughter. And the world didn't end. That night, Mia hugged me and said, Mom, you talked to my school? I did. In English? In my English. Slow English. But they understood. Mia squeezed me tighter. You're so brave. I almost laughed. Brave? I was terrified the whole time. But to a 6-year-old, picking up the phone is brave. To a 6-year-old, trying is brave. Maybe she was right. After that call, something changed in my brain. The fear was still there. But it was smaller. Because I had proof. Proof that I could speak and be understood. Proof that people were not waiting to laugh at me. Proof that slow English is still English. I started speaking more. Everywhere. At the grocery store, I asked where the butter was. At the park, I told another mom that her baby was cute. At the doctor's office, I described my headache, not perfectly, but enough. I still spoke slowly. Very slowly. Sometimes painfully slowly. But here is the secret I discovered. Americans don't mind slow. They mind silence. When you are silent, they don't know what you're thinking. When you speak slowly, they wait. Most of them. The good ones. And the ones who don't wait. The ones who sigh or look away? They are not your people. Don't waste your tears on them. David noticed the change. One evening, he said, "You talked to the neighbor today." For like 10 minutes. I had. Mrs. Patterson, the older woman next door. She asked about the kids. I told her about Leo's dinosaur obsession and Mia's drawings. My English was slow. My grammar was wrong. I said he have many dinosaurs instead of has. But Mrs. Patterson didn't correct me. She just smiled and said, "My son loved dinosaurs too. They grow so fast." We had a conversation. A real one. Not perfect. But real. David said, "I'm proud of you." Those words. The same words Leo had said months ago. They never got old. Here's what I learned about speaking slowly. Slow is not a weakness. Slow is a gift. When you speak slowly, you give your brain time to find the words. You give the other person time to listen. You create space. Real connection lives in that space. Americans speak fast because they are rushed. But rushed conversations are shallow. Slow conversations go deep. My slow English forced people to slow down with me. And when they slowed down, we actually talked. Not just exchanged information. We connected. I started to enjoy speaking. Not because I was good at it. Because I stopped caring about being good. I started caring about being real. One night, David and I were lying in bed. The lights were off. The house was quiet. He said, "Tell me something." Anything. In English. I thought for a moment. Then I said, "Before, I thought you would leave me. Because my English was bad. I thought you would find someone who could talk to you. Someone easy." David turned to face me. "Why didn't you tell me?" Because I didn't have the words. Now I have small words. Small words are enough. He put his arm around me. "I'm not going anywhere. I married you. Not your English." I cried. Of course I cried. But they were the best kind of tears. The kind that washes away old fears and makes room for new hope. Speaking slowly taught me something deeper than language. It taught me that love doesn't need speed. Love needs honesty. And honesty can be spoken in any accent, any pace, any grammar. In the next part, I'll tell you about the early miracle. The morning I woke up and realized my family had healed. Not perfectly. Not completely. But enough. More than enough. The early miracle. There is a moment in every long journey when you stop and look around and realize you are not where you started. You didn't arrive at the destination you imagined. But somehow, you arrived somewhere better. That moment came for me on a random Tuesday morning. Not a special day. No anniversary. No birthday. No holiday. Just a Tuesday. The sun was actually shining in Oregon, which, if you live here, you know is a small miracle by itself. I woke up before my alarm. Not from anxiety. Not from a midnight phone call. I just opened my eyes and felt light. My chest wasn't heavy. My mind wasn't racing. I felt like I had actually slept. I lay in bed for a minute, listening. The house was quiet. But not the painful quiet of before. A peaceful quiet. The kind of quiet that happens when everyone is safe and resting. Then I heard it. Laughter. Leo's laugh first. That high-pitched giggle he does when he's truly happy. Then Mia's laugh, softer but just as real. And then David's laugh, deep and warm, the laugh I fell in love with years ago, the laugh I thought we had lost. They were in the kitchen. All three of them. Together. Without me. I got out of bed and walked down the hallway. I stood at the kitchen doorway, hidden for a moment, watching. David was making pancakes. Leo was standing on a chair, pouring chocolate chips into the batter. Mia was drawing at the table, but she was drawing with her left hand while eating a pancake with her right. Maple syrup everywhere. A beautiful mess. Leo said, "Dad, remember when Mom told us the fish story? The fish who wanted to fly?" David said, "I remember." Leo said, "Mom is like that fish. She kept jumping. And now she can fly." David stopped flipping pancakes. He looked at Leo. Then he looked up and saw me standing in the doorway. He smiled. That real smile. "Good morning, Flyer." I walked into the kitchen. Mia ran to me and hugged my legs. Leo waved a sticky, chocolate-covered hand. David handed me a cup of coffee, already made, the way I like it. I sat down at the table. My family was around me. Talking. Laughing. Making a mess. And I thought, this is the miracle. Not a phone call. Not a single sentence. Not a perfect English test score. This. A Tuesday morning. Pancakes. Syrup on the table. Laughter in the air. The miracle was not one big event. The miracle was hundreds of small moments, stacked on top of each other, until they became a life. I had spent so many years waiting for a sign. Waiting to feel ready. Waiting for my English to be perfect. Waiting for the fear to disappear. But fear doesn't disappear. It just gets smaller. And one day, you realize there is more love in your house than fear. And that is enough. That morning, David said something that stayed with me. He said, "Remember 6 months ago? We couldn't even eat breakfast together without silence." I remembered. The silent dinners. The separate rooms. The cold distance between us on the couch. He continued, "I didn't think we would make it. I thought you would give up. Or I would give up. But you didn't. You kept jumping." Leo looked up from his pancakes. "Like the fish." "Like the fish," David agreed. Mia said, "Mom, can you tell the fish story? In English?" My heart jumped. In English? In front of everyone? No preparation? No rehearsal? I took a breath. I said, "Okay. But my English is slow." Mia said, "That's okay. We'll wait." So I told the story. In slow English. With wrong verb tenses. With simple words. With my accent that will probably never go away. There was a small fish. She lived in a big river. All the other fish could swim fast. But this fish, she wanted to fly. The other fish laughed. They said, "Fish don't fly. You are stupid." But the fish kept jumping. Every day. Every night. She jumped so many times. One day, she didn't fly. But she didn't need to. Because she realized, jumping was the point. Trying was the point. And the other fish? They stopped laughing. They started watching. And some of them started jumping too. When I finished, the kitchen was quiet. Then Leo clapped. Mia clapped. David smiled and said, "That's a good story." I said, "It's our story." David put his hand on mine. "It is. Here's what I want you to understand. The early miracle is not about becoming fluent overnight. The early miracle is about waking up one day and realizing you are no longer drowning. You are swimming. Slowly. Awkwardly. But swimming. The early miracle is a Tuesday morning with pancakes and sticky fingers and laughter. The early miracle is your child asking you to tell a story in English, not because you're perfect, but because you're you. The early miracle is looking at your husband across the table and remembering why you fell in love, even when you couldn't say it in his language. The early miracle happened for me on a random Tuesday. But it could happen for you on a random Thursday. Or a Sunday. Or a midnight phone call. You don't need to wait for a big sign. The small signs are everywhere. A child's hand on your cheek. A husband's real smile. A pancake with too many chocolate chips. That Tuesday morning, I didn't feel like a stranger in my own home anymore. I felt like the heart of it. Not because my English was good. Because my love was loud. And love speaks every language. In the final part, I'll tell you what I want you to take away from this whole story. Not advice. Not grammar rules. Just one truth that might change your midnight too. Your midnight is waiting. So here we are. The end of the story. Or maybe, the beginning of yours. I have told you about midnight phone calls and broken English. About silent dinners and crying in the kitchen. About a little boy who saw his mother's pain and called it by name. About a husband who learned to use small words. About a daughter who drew the truth when no one would say it. I have told you about listening to the music of a new language. About reading the cries behind the silence. About speaking slowly and loving deeply. And I have told you about a Tuesday morning with pancakes and laughter, the early miracle that came not because I was ready, but because I kept showing up. Now I want to talk to you. Directly. Heart to heart. You are watching this video for a reason. Maybe you are struggling with English. Maybe you feel invisible in your own life. Maybe your marriage is quiet in a way that scares you. Maybe your children are growing up in a language you will never fully own. I see you. I was you. And I want to tell you something that took me years to learn. You don't need to be perfect to be loved. You don't need to speak without an accent to belong. You don't need to understand every word to understand what matters. What matters is showing up. What matters is trying. What matters is picking up the phone at midnight, or answering it, and saying something real. I used to believe that the miracle would come when my English was good. When I could talk without mistakes. When I could finally be normal. But that day never came. Because that day doesn't exist. There is no finish line where you suddenly become perfect. The miracle came on the days I spoke anyway. The miracle came when I made mistakes and kept going. The miracle came when I stopped hiding in the kitchen and sat on the couch, even when I didn't understand the TV show. The miracle came in small steps. A phone call to the school. A conversation with a neighbor. A story told in broken English to a child who didn't care about grammar. Your miracle is waiting too. But it's not waiting for you to be ready. It's waiting for you to start. Start where you are. Not where you wish you were. Start with small words. Not big speeches. Start with 5 minutes of listening to the radio, even if you understand nothing. Your brain is working. Trust it. Start with one sentence to your partner. I had a hard day. 3 words. That's enough. Start with a midnight call, not on the phone, but to yourself. Ask yourself, what am I afraid of? And then answer honestly. Here is the truth about fear. Fear grows in silence. The more you avoid speaking, the bigger the fear becomes. The more you hide, the heavier the shame. But when you finally open your mouth, even to say something wrong, the fear shrinks. Just a little. Just enough to take the next step. You don't have to climb the whole mountain today. Just put one foot in front of the other. And then another. And another. I remember the night Leo called me at 3 a.m. He was 8 years old. He didn't have a plan. He didn't have perfect English. He just had love. And that love was enough to save me. You have someone who loves you. Maybe a child. Maybe a partner. Maybe a friend. Maybe even yourself, buried under all that fear. That love is enough. Let it be your reason to try. One more thing before I go. Americans, and people everywhere, are not looking for perfect speakers. They are looking for real people. They want to know you. Not your grammar score. Your laugh. Your story. Your weird accent that makes you who you are. I still make mistakes every day. I still forget words. I still say he go instead of he goes. David still smiles. Leo still waits. Mia still draws pictures of our family, and now, the mom stick figure is in the middle, holding hands with everyone else. That drawing hangs on our refrigerator. I look at it every morning. It reminds me that I belong. Not because I speak perfectly. Because I stayed. I tried. I jumped. So here is my final question for you. What is your midnight? What is the thing you are afraid to answer? What is the phone call you won't make, the conversation you avoid, the sentence you never finish? And what if, just what if, answering it could bring an early miracle? You don't have to believe it will work. You just have to try. Once. Small words. Slow pace. Honest heart. Pick up the phone. Open your mouth. Tell your story. Your midnight is waiting. But it's not a threat. It's an invitation. Before you click away, I want you to sit with me for just one more minute. You came here because of a title, Midnight Phone Call. What if late nights bring early miracles? You stayed because somewhere inside, you recognized your own story. The loneliness. The fear of speaking. The silence in your own home. But here is what I haven't told you yet. The miracle I shared with you? It wasn't the end. It was just the first page. After that Tuesday morning with pancakes and laughter, something else happened. Something I am not ready to tell you today. Another midnight call. Another impossible choice. Another miracle that made the first one look small. But that story is for another video. And that is why I need you to do something right now. Click the subscribe button. Not because I want a number. Because I want to find you again. I want to sit across from you in the dark, through your screen, and tell you the rest. The part about what happened when I finally stopped being afraid of my own voice. The part about the letter David wrote me in my native language. The part about the night Mia spoke to her entire school assembly, in English, and thanked her brave, slow-speaking mom. You haven't heard the best part yet. Because the best part is still being written. And I want you to be here when I share it. So here is my midnight promise to you. Every week, I will sit down in my quiet kitchen, usually after midnight, when the kids are asleep, and I will tell you another real story. Slow English. Real emotions. No fake confidence. Just one immigrant wife, one imperfect mother, one woman who is still learning to speak and love and belong. And you? You will practice your listening. You will grow your vocabulary without even trying. You will realize that if I can do it, so can you. But only if you stay. Subscribe. Hit the bell. And the next time your phone rings at midnight, or your heart feels too heavy to sleep, remember, the miracle doesn't come when you're ready. It comes when you answer. That's all for today. I will make more similar videos in the future. Please subscribe to watch. See you in the next video. Same channel. Same late night. New story.